俾個咪梁耀忠議員。
Please give the floor to Mr. Leung Yu-chung. Chairman, I find it unacceptable that the sports park can jump the queue this year for Mr. Matthew Zhang had a meeting with us, and I wanted him to give precedence to the less controversial issue and the easy to approve items first. And this is disappointing because the sports park is very controversial and it's not the most urgent project. According to the administration, if it is late, there may be an increase in cost by $1.8 billion, and therefore the paper has to be passed ASAP. Although there is the opportunity that another $1.8 billion will be incurred, perhaps it's because the project is too big. And the reason why it is too big is perhaps due to this design, build, and operate arrangement. A contractor will deal with all three stages under the contract, and that's the reason why the project is so expensive. And because of the DCO arrangement, the project is going to be very expensive. Why must it be a contract? Why must it be a DCO project? Now, I'm not a member of the PWSC, so it's the first time I've commented on this item. Perhaps the administration should explain to us why can't the administration manage the venue itself. All LCSD facilities are being managed by the department itself. Of course, that may not the administration's management is not the best, but that doesn't mean that it cannot improve on it and manage the sports park itself. Why must the operation be given to another contractor? And if design and construction are being done by the same contractor, I don't know whether we're going to save costs in this way. If all three things are put together in one contract, then the number of eligible tenderers will for sure be reduced, and as a result you have to introduce a bid incentive. So this is unreasonable. Shouldn't the administration explain to us why must it be a DCO project? Secretary, Mr. Leung asked whether the project size is too big. In fact, the project size depends on needs. Hong Kong need a 50 main stadium with a 50,000 seating capacity, and district-wise, we also need a sports ground and stadium that can host international events. And so the scale of the project is big, but it is indeed due to the needs. And why do we have a DBO arrangement? Mr. Leung is a veteran member here. I think you have seen projects in this council where design was done first, and afterwards there was build, and then when the operator only came in after construction, there may be various problems. So if we have a DBO approach right from the beginning, the operator will know how to design, and the design will know how the venue is to be operated. This is particularly important for the main stadium. In addition to sports events, it will be used for other purposes as well. So if the designer and the operator can discuss, I'm sure it will be more effective and efficient, and that will ensure effective management. Don't forget that the operator is going to manage the venue for 20 years. So I think it is most desirable if we have a DBO arrangement. And why can't the government manage the sports park itself? Because we want to get maximum cost effectiveness using a market mechanism. Mrs. Regina Ip. I support the construction of the sports park because it's been 20 years since the handover, and I think one of our greatest achievements is in sports. We have a world-renowned athletes. In particular, we have won 3 gold medals, and 2 of which are ladies. We have Miss Li Lai Shan and also Miss Li Wai Chi, and then we have in golf. We have Miss Chen Chi Ching, who practiced in Tuen Mun. Many people think that golf is an elite sport. In fact, it is now a popular one because the Jockey Club Gao Shai Chow has a long queue. Amateur golfers have told me that because the northern apron of the airport is now being developed, we have fewer driving ranges. Now there will be badminton courts and bowling. And what about golfing course? Golfers have told me that they lack practicing space because with more venues, I'm sure people can play better. That's the case with Taiwan and South Korea, and Hong Kong is just the same. So what about golf courses? Can we have some facilities for golfers here? Thank you, Mrs. Regina Ib, for noting the achievements of our athletes. And they have won the acclaim of many members of the public, and that's why we have people from the sports sector here to support us. Many members in this council would like our sports to develop. The best encouragement for our sportsmen to scale new heights is to pass the construction of the sports park here. That's number 1. And secondly, Mrs. Regina Ip referred to the construction of a golf course. Of course, we have got 9 golf courses in Hong Kong. Mrs. Regina Ip is of the view that we don't have enough. In fact, it's not just golf, crickets and baseball and so on and so forth. As they become more popular, we are short of venues for these events. We're going to spend $20 billion to popularize the development of such facilities.
So in the next 5 years, we will study on how to have more other sports facilities. Now, apart from the Kai Tak Sports Park, which we hope will be commissioned as soon as possible in the next 5 years, in Park Shek, Sha Tin, we propose that there should be another sports park there. This will be good news for the sports sector. So we think we are going to have more and more support for the sports sector. Now, apart from ball courts, we need driving ranges. Chen Chi Ching recently turned professional. He has been in his first match. He has performed well. Now, can the LCSD provide the driving ranges information to me? Chou Sing Yu also did well. Now, on design, build, and operate mode, firstly, I'm not against encouraging people to submit bids with financial incentives. Now, at the development panel, I already said that preparing a tender document is costly. It requires input by many experts. Now, on design, build, and operate, now if I gain the contract, I have to make money. Now, how can you ensure that they will not maximize their profits as the link did? Now, we will look at the targets or indicators in formulating the tender document, and we will have a tendering committee to oversee the process. And Chang, now I remember the Kai-Tak Sports Park. When I was in the sports committee, I first came in touch with it. It's been over 10 years. People were just talking and not implementing it. So the Home Affairs Bureau finally implements this proposal, and I think it's welcome to the sports sector. A few weeks ago, we contacted different sports bodies. Everyone looked forward to the early commissioning of this sizable sports park, and this administration has finally made the decision. We welcome that. The 18 districts have all along sought to have dozens of sports facilities, and finally the HAB has managed to get this going. Now, many members of the public felt that perhaps there can be venues found near the sports park for a swimming pool, because there will be hundreds of thousands of residents who will be in Kai-Tak. It doesn't have to be, so they wouldn't have to travel so far as a Koshan Theater in order to swim. Now, in Kowloon City District, there is a warm water pool, but we understand Kai-Tak is a new developed area. It needs a new pool, even though we are not able to provide it within the Kai-Tak Sports Park, yet within 300 or 400 meters from it, we're going to have an indoor sports center, and there will be a warm water swimming pool for local residents. This is under design. Little later on, we will consult the Kowloon City District Council. Well, I think the Kai-Tak residents will be happy to hear this, because every time they see me, they talk about this too. And if we manage to pass this proposal in FC today, I hope that the construction can start early. I don't want to see a delay as in so many other government projects. Also, please don't have another cost overrun, and the DAB supports this in principle wholeheartedly. Now, there's a recent saying that we have been to hell and back again. Now, there was a $800 million cost overrun in respect of the earlier item. So I'd like to ask several questions. The $60 million of bid incentives. Now, the official said that this is one-off only. It will not be repeated. Now, I'd like to ask, how do you determine the $60 million figure? Now, I'm not familiar with projects, and I'm not familiar with the bid incentive concept either. The Secretary said that the $60 million will get us more cost-effective tenders. Now, well, I am slightly unsure how this is calculated. Also, on the popularization of sports. Now, when I was young, I engaged in sports in the Moyi Hub Road sports ground. I'm not talking about these super facilities. Now, although you say this is accessible to everyone, but when we're talking about popularization of sports, there are 18 districts, there are tens of sports facilities there. Will you upgrade those facilities? And these district facilities aside, there are sports grounds within schools. You don't often find them well utilized, so we should try to make better use of them. Now, there are, of course, security issues, insurance issues. If the general public get to use these facilities, of course, the schools cannot resolve that. Perhaps the government can do something about it, because the schools merely make the venues available. Now, for popularization of sports, so that the public enjoy sports, I think these are practical issues that we must address. The Secretary? Now, the Permanent Secretary can explain about the $60 million figure. I also look forward to the popularization of sports so that it becomes part of people's lives, and we hope to have more sports events. Now, members talked about some very attractive sports events recently. So this is a good time to build the sports park. Now, on bid incentives, now if we can attract more competitors, certainly the works will proceed more smoothly and the bids will be more attractive. It's very simple. Now, $30 billion, this $30 billion project, if it's more, there are more competitive bids, if the cost is reduced by 1%, that would be $300 million already. So I think the incentive is necessary. Now, with the bid incentives, we can make use of the best elements in those unsuccessful tendering and in those unsuccessful tenders. Now, in PWSC, we mentioned that to prepare a tender, it requires $100 to $200 million. Now, because over 40 professionals or sectors, professional sectors are involved, so it costs $150 to $200 million. So $60 million is only up to 30%, and we kept it at $60 million. So the any tenderer will have to pay for 60 to 70% of the cost. So we think that the bid incentive is really required to attract some groups. Okay. Now, the sports sector has looked forward to this item for a long time. As I said several times, I will certainly support it, but I'm concerned about several issues. Firstly, in future, the users will mainly be from the sports sector. How do you ensure that the facilities meet the sector's needs? The government said that it will organize a committee to monitor the operation of the park. Now, when will you set up this committee? And what will be its functions? How do you ensure that the committee's ideas will be implemented when the park is in operation, or will its views be ignored? And will the committee fully represent the sector, and how do you arrive at its membership? Can the government answer, please? Also, assuming that the tender results are out and are not satisfactory, for instance, the bids are too high and no bidder meets the government's requirements, does the government have an alternative approach to take things forward? On the second part, I will ask the PS to reply. Now, concerning the committee, now back in the PWSC, we didn't have this idea yet, but we heard members concerned about the future operations, and this is also our concern. We don't want to just build the hardware and see it being poorly operated. So we propose that there will be a committee to be appointed, of course, by the administration, and we hope that it will be made up of people from the sports sector, like the Sports Federation and Olympics Committee, those from the handicapped groups and performance groups, district council, or even electrical representation, hopefully. And we hope that the committee can be instituted at an early date so that it can have a good grasp of future market developments. Now, Mr. Ma and we all understand that we cannot foresee the developments 10 or 20 years later. That's why we hope that 1 year before the sports park is commissioned, the committee would be in place so that all stakeholders will be engaged in monitoring. And apart from monitoring, the committee should help to design how the sports park is going to operate to meet people's aspirations. Now, concerning the tendering, we are doing a forecast of $23.8 billion, and the Development Bureau has examined the figures, so we are quite confident that the $31.9 billion, that includes the contingency costs and the price adjustment factors. Now, if the bids exceed this figure, we will talk to the successful bidder and negotiate on prices. For instance, there are optional items in the tenders, and one can decide whether the items would be engaged in. Now, if the if our requirements are not met, there might have to be a retender. These are in accordance with the usual tendering practice. Professor Yu Chung-in. Now, we believe the officials heard our discussion concerning the Sha Tin Central line. Now, now looking at the document now of the $31.9 billion, 1/4 of it is the price adjustment reserve. Now you don't directly appoint the contractor, so because you use the design, build, and operate mode, so the successful bidder will appoint the contractor. So will you require that the successful bidder should have a price adjustment reserve in accordance with government requirements, or will you let the successful bidder make its own decisions? Will you ensure us that you will regularly provide us with the actual expenditures, unlike what you do now, where the figures are not in the ones actually expended. Now, the Commissioner for Sports, now the one single group will be responsible for all three parts, including the building part. Now we will sign a contract with a price adjustment mechanism in accordance with public works practice. This will be reflected. This mechanism will be reflected in the contract. You mean you will use the standard contract for public works? There will be one contract that will be signed with the successful bidder, and the terms will be in accordance with the public works mechanism, which includes the price adjustment mechanism. What kind of standard contract is it? It's according to the guidelines set by the Development Bureau in respect of public works. There would be fluctuation clause. Now, that wouldn't apply to DBO, right?
We will adopt the government's PWP contracts for price adjustment in coming up with that contract. Can you provide a sample for the DBO contract to us? Well, Chairman, our contract is still being drafted, so we don't have the contract with us now. Professor Edward Yu, I'd like to put on record that upon completion of the draft contract, please provide a copy to this Council, and you should ensure that there would be a price adjustment provision in the contract. Chairman, well, in the tendering document, as usual, we will gazette it, and at that juncture, members will be able to see what the contract is all about. Okay? Next, Lang Chi-Chang. Thank you, Chairman. Concerning the construction of the sports park, I think most people who are in favor of sports would be prepared to give their full support, and of course I would be one of them. The construction of the sports park is something that we would like to see as soon as possible, but then after the administration proposed to introduce this DBO approach, we felt that it's something new, and there are a lot of suspicions about this DBO approach. That's why more questions have been asked, and even at the PWSC stage, I also asked questions about the DBO practice. I was concerned about the post-commissioning operation. I wasn't that concerned about the pre-operation or pre-commissioning bid. I think the bid incentive part is acceptable because after all we are talking about a major project. We are talking about a project costing more than $30 billion. And even if they were to put in a bid and they had to do the design, they will have to engage specialists or experts, and these are not experts that can be easily found. So I would be prepared to support the proposal to introduce this bid incentive. But then in the past, we have never operated any venue in the form of a DBO. Would it result in a situation whereby only the operators would benefit rather than the public, or only a very small portion of the community will benefit from it? That's what I'm concerned about. And of course, the Secretary said just now that in the contract we can include terms to safeguard our interests. But what if the operator is going to close his business? Does the administration have any plans for that? All right, you can put in a lot of nice terms in the contract. I remember when the Urban Council tried to take back the Hong Kong Stadium, it worked very hard. A lot of preparation was made, and the administration had to go down to the stadium to make preparation for that. It was quite a headache. So at the time, the government was very determined. That's why it managed to do it after all. On this occasion, I'm concerned whether or not you have sufficient manpower and confidence to take over the management of such a mega venue in the event that the operator ceases operation. Mrs. Fong, well, assuming what Mr. Leung said happened, okay, after a while, if the contractor is not able to complete the contract, then of course there would be penalty clauses in the contract. For example, we talk about the guarantee fund. Well, of course, they will have to put in a deposit, and then you can punish him. What if he is not able to continue the operation? For the cruise terminal in Kai Tak, the shopping center is not functioning at all. Well, the current thinking is that the administration might be taking over for a while, but then we still intend that for the operating contract, we can put it out for retendering, so that there might be operators who are interested, in particular for the main stadium and also the commercial facilities. And in the financial estimates that we submitted to this council, we hope that there would be some profit to be generated from the operation, so that the private sector might be interested in it. So you can refer to the paper that we submitted to this paper. When compared to the Hong Kong Stadium, well, it's just an operation contract, so this time is different. So you will have to support the operation and management of the sports park by the commercial operations, because the venue hiring rental cannot be too high, and of course you will have to make it successful commercially. It's not just about the shopping center, it's also about the surrounding atmosphere. So in order to ensure that is commercially viable, you may have to spend more money. So $30 billion may not be enough. So what is your thinking? So will you be thinking about that, or will you be leaving everything to the contractor? Well, I believe that this is a self-sufficient facility. I don't think it would have to depend on other facilities, because in terms of its location, it's very accessible, and also it has its own retail, dining, and entertainment facilities, because it's just 300 meters away from the MTR station. It's very accessible, and even if the contract has to be put out for retendering, well, the commercial elements should be able to support the entire sports park. And if you look at the fundamental situation when compared to the worst case scenario, it should be able to support the operating cost for the entire sports park. Dr. Kwok Kaki, Chairman, I think we support the sports development in Hong Kong, but then on this occasion, the sports park is not doing what it pledges to do. Because from what we have seen, if you look at the main stadium, Many of these are not sports facilities. According to the paper, upon commissioning, about 3 or 4 years later, I think it would be close to 2030. Throughout the year, only 30 days will involve the use of the main stadium. And many of these activities are not sports related. Many of them are mega concerts or even celebration of the anniversary of the National Day and so on. And for the best case scenario, well, 8 days would be for cricket, and also for soccer and local events, only 2 days, and then 20 days would be for the Chinese soccer team. And also some of them would be for other sports, like for rugby and so on. Well, if this is the case, then only 2 days would be for local soccer matches. So why do we have to turn it into a venue for the China League matches? If we were to do that, why would we not go to Shenzhen for that? And also, just 2 would be for local soccer matches. And I just found out that it's really regrettable when it comes to the government's so-called support for local sports activities. I think it's next to nothing for South China, which is a local team, and it has to be downgraded because of the lack of support. And if you're going to organize just a handful of matches without the participation of any local team, we are talking about the reunification match, and none of the local teams takes part. So for outside teams, they can do better football. Then why don't we just ask everybody to watch the UK Soccer League? So please do not use this as an excuse, and then you just build this white elephant project. We can see that the cruise terminal is a very good example. That's why we are very careful this time. We are asking the administration to furnish the details, and yet they are not convincing at all. And if you look at their estimates, well, for the $31.8 billion, well, some $8 billion, in other words, some 33% for the design and build costs would be for provision for price adjustment. And then you also have contingency amounting to some $2.3 billion. So a very substantial share of the money will be placed here, and you're telling the contractor that we have this $10 billion here for you to take. So who would do this? Who would be putting out all the contingencies and also provisioncy for price adjustment here? You're actually trying to circumvent this council in the future so that we will not be able to see how or why there's cost overrun. So you're putting this out for the tenderer to take. Well, we have had this many times, and Hong Kong people have been shortchanged on many occasions, and now you're doing it again. So for the concrete help or support for the sports sector is minimal. So you're talking about some $30 billion being spent this way. So I'd like to ask the administration, but because last time I asked for the draft contract and they refused to give us. So in the design, build, so do you have any cap? And also in terms of operation, do you have any cap for that? And also the third question is, why is it that for the main stadium, why would it be used for the Chinese league team's main venue? So how can it be said that it's used to support the local sports development? Well, I'd like to respond to some remarks made by Dr. Kwok, and then my colleagues will respond to the details. Well, Dr. Kwok apparently was suggesting that the sports park would not be helpful to the sports sector at all. I don't think that's the case. Because if you look at this project, we have had many rounds of consultation, and we have had the full support of the sports sector, and the sports sector is looking forward to this sports park to be completed early. I hope that Dr. Kwok can support it as soon as possible so that it can be commissioned as soon as possible. For future operation, I'll defer to the Sports Commissioner to respond to this. Chairman, I'd like to respond to the remarks made by Dr. Kwok. the figures that he cited, well, those were the remarks made by a stakeholder at the public consultation. Well, in fact, on the 25th of May, we submitted a paper, and we expect that for the 30 days of the main stadium, over half of them would be for sports activities, either matches or rugbies, and only less than half would be non-sports activities. So we never mentioned that there would be Chinese league matches and so on. That's the first clarification. And also, on the cap on operation, well, in accordance with PWP projects, we would not be setting any cap for profits, and therefore, if it's a competitive bid, then the bidders would always try to make sure that their bid prices would be competitive. Okay, next, Eunice Yong. I support the sports park project. Well, in terms of popularizing sports and also professionalization, I think it's going to be beneficial. I have several concerns, and I see that the administration can extend the contract, and many members have already asked about the DBO. You're combining all the three elements in the tendering exercise, and according to what is said here, well, the contract should be awarded for 25 years. In fact, I have some reservation about this. And also in the first paragraph, you talk about renewing the contract, and also for the unsuccessful bidder, you would have this bid incentive. And I noticed that the $60 million would also include buying up their intellectual property right and also professional license and so on. Well, that can also be used in the design and build process, but then that would not be used in the operating phase. How come it cannot be separated so that you can have a standalone tendering exercise for that? So why do you have to incorporate operation in the design and build process? This is not reasonable, because in the paragraph you said that you can extend the operating phase to up to 10 years. In fact, the administration has already accepted that operation can be separated. If he's doing a good job, then he can be given further contracts. But then, of course, I would also not understand why do you have to give the contract for 25 years, because if he's not doing a good job and you can only retender the project after 25 years, then how can it be most beneficial to the public? You should have reviewed it once every 5 years, so that you will make sure that for the next 10 years they'll be able to do a good job, because for sports operation, we are talking about a trend. Well, for the next few years, well, people might be more interested in Thai boxing, but then they might be interested in something else 5 years later. And if you're awarding the contract for 25 years, of course, it will take 5 years for them to build the venue. So would it be most economically beneficial? And also, on page 11, you also said that there would be a pre-qualification process, and up to 3 tenderers will be selected in this process. What if there are fewer than 3? If there are only 2, then are you going to do the same? In other words, in terms of the pre-qualification, what are you going to do? And I'd also like to know a bit more about footnote 9, about the conforming bid. They will have to fulfill the requirement, and what are the requirements? Can you show that to us? Well, for the first question on the bid incentive, yes, Ms. Yong is a professional. I'm sure you would understand that for professionals to design and come up with ideas is also part of their intellectual property right. And in the past, when we did bidding, if there were 3 bids, and if we were to choose 1 out of the 3, we could not use the intellectual property right for the remaining 2. But then on this occasion, it's very unique. We'd be able to make use of the intellectual property rights in the unsuccessful bids, because even if you win, it doesn't mean that all the features are good. And if we are able to identify the best features from the losing bids, we will be able to do a better job. As to why operation is not separated from this, that's precisely because we are talking about a major construction, and if the operator has been involved in the early stage of design, and if he can give his input, then of course the designer will be able to meet the needs of the operator. On the contrary, the operator would also be able to ask the designer to do his job better. Because this is not just for sports events, it can be used for other purposes. That's why on day one, at the very first stage, if all the stakeholders can give their input to the designer, that would definitely be good. As to the review, we will have an interim review after 10 years. And Ms. Yong, you can rest assured, we have already promised that we will be setting up a committee 1 year before the commissioning of the venue so that it can do its monitoring work, and there will be an interim review. Mrs. Fong, I'd like to supplement on the tenders. Ms. Yong asked that when it comes back, even if we offer the bid incentive, what if there are only 2 bids? We have repeatedly said that if there's only 1 or if there are only 2 bids, then it's very likely that we will announce that it's a failed tender, and there is a lack of competition. We will have to do it again. That's why we have insisted on offering this bid incentive, because only where there are 3 bids would it be a competitive bidding process. Thank you. Next, Dr. Fernando Zhang, 5 minutes. Well, Chairman, the government likes to give money to people to run their business. Okay, this is an example, and the earlier case was we give money to the MTRCL to do its business, and they don't even have to go for tendering. So we just entrusted to the MTRCL, you're responsible for design, build, and operate, and if you have any cost overrun, all you need to do is to come to this council, like coming to an at.am. Okay, you're talking about $31.9 billion. We will pay for all the construction costs. It's okay. And then if you fail in your bidding process, it's okay. We'll be giving you $60 million. It doesn't matter. So the consortia in Hong Kong really are highly privileged. And our government has been creating a very conducive business environment for them. And then if there are any problems, we'll be responsible. And with the 3 main facilities built, including some 60,000 square meters of commercial facilities, including RDE facilities, only 1 single consortium will be controlling everything. And then for the $31.9 billion project, if there is any cost overrun, does it intend to come back to this council to use the at.am again? So why don't we call this an at.am committee instead of the finance committee? And in future, for major repairs and maintenance, again, we'll be responsible. This is really a very good deal for the contractor, because we'll be funding for everything. So even for those who lose, they will get $60 million. And if they win, then of course it's a windfall, because every dollar and cent will be shouldered by the community. They don't have to pay for the construction, design, and operation. They'll be making a lot of profits. And then for the 60,000 square meters, they'll be able to make profits out of that. But then what are we talking about? We're talking about a sports park. Okay? Is it for sports or is it for commercial activities? Okay, if we are using this to promote sports development, why are we so generous? Why are we thinking that we cannot manage it ourselves, and then it will not be cost effective? That's why we have to get a consortium to run it.
Consortium that would be operated purely on commercial principles, and profits will go first. And this is very different from having a sports park for public enjoyment. There is contradiction whether the facility should be for maximizing profits or for the disadvantaged groups to enjoy is totally different. For instance, for the design of the main stadium, should there be more VIP boxes or for more places for the disabled? The 2 are in contradiction. Instead of placing wheelchairs there, I can use the space for VIP boxes to make more profit, and that's the major difference. So if this big facility is to be managed by a consortium that wants to profiteer for 25 years. How can we be that generous and friendly to businessmen? Well, this government is most friendly and accommodating to the business sector, but for athletes that want to take up sports as their lifelong career, do they need this money? They don't even have enough venues and facilities for practice. They don't have enough support. They don't have enough coaches. And you are spending so much money on this sports park. Is that really helping our athletes? Will it ensure that people from all walks of life in Hong Kong can participate in sports? Or when you talk about interest, benefits, all right, if these $1.9 billion, should there be cost overrun over this $31.9 billion, can you guarantee that it will be okay and then they will not come back for extra money? The only way to ensure there is no budget overrun or cost overrun is for Dr. Fernando Cheung to support it now, and then we can start the project within this year, and there will be no cost overrun. Dr. Wong, I'm sure we're all angry hearing Mr. Lau Kong Wah's reply. Why don't you be more honest and tell us whether there will be any possibility of cost overrun? I think this is already clear from para 18. In the event of a capital cost overrun and the exceedance is not attributable to the contractor, further approval might need to be sought. That means when there is a cost overrun, there's the likelihood that you will come back for more funding. And we don't know whether, in your opinion, there will be a cost overrun or not, because in the last 4 lines of this paragraph, you say that a DBO contract with a single entity will facilitate its supervision and management over the project. To allow a single entity to design and construct the sports park according to its operation strategy will also help enhance construction efficiency and risk management, thus ensuring the delivery of the project on time and within budget. That means by using a single contract, you will ensure that there is no cost overrun or slippage. So I don't know whether you believe there will or will not be any cost overrun. Now, this is a DBO contract. Since this consortium is responsible for the design, then there are some difficulties here. You're asking for $31.9 billion, $12 billion is for construction. So even before design is done, you have an estimate for construction of the 3 venues plus supporting features will cost about $12.7 billion. That's just your estimate even before design is done. That means the successful tenderer will have to design the facilities within the estimate of $12.7 billion and no more. Is that correct? For all items submitted to the PWC we use the same approach in making estimates. There is nothing special about this item, and the final distribution of the budget will be according to the bids, and we have a consultancy team to help us do the estimate. For the final tendering and scoring, it will be done at the next stage. All right, you say that about $12.7 billion will be for construction, and para 18 says that should there be a capital cost overrun, you may come back for more money. Design is to be done by that contractor. And if the design cannot be delivered using $12.7 billion, well, it all depends on what materials and methodology you use. The cost may even be more than $12.7 billion. So unless you're saying that $12.7 billion is the cap for the construction cost, and of course you will look at whether the tender details are reasonable. If they give you very cheap materials and still the construction cost $12.7 billion, then this is also unreasonable. So because you haven't been very detailed in your tender documents, the more meticulous you are, the less likelihood you have a cost overrun. If the cap is $12.7 billion, it's quite likely that the cost will overrun. I think that's the part of the reasons for XRL and other products. We've done a very detailed assessment. Our consultant has done a reference design. So we have a reference design for all the venues, and we ask quantity surveyors to calculate the prices and come up with this budget. Of course, we welcome tenderers to use more cost-effective and innovative ideas, and the prices may be different as a result. However, our estimate here is very reasonable. We are confident that we're able to get all we want within this estimate. Mr. Ray Chen, I thank the Secretary for attending this meeting because at PWSC meetings, only the PS was present, and even the pro-establishment camp. How come the Secretary was not here? Has he underestimated the importance of this item? So you only won by a margin of 1 vote, but of course you have revised the paper that will allow graceful step down for the pro-establishment camp. And so anyway, the Secretary is here. I beg to differ from the views of some of the members here. I won't say that the bid incentive is for sure collusion or transfer of benefits to the business sector. There is beauty to this arrangement because it will encourage more tenderers to try to bid for government tenders. It will also help medium-sized tenderers to submit a bid so that the tendering exercise will not be monopolized by only the large consortia. So there is no need for Ms. Elizabeth Zhe to say that this is just a one-off arrangement. We may be able to benefit medium-sized contractors. I think we should discuss whether the bid incentive here will achieve its desired effect. The positive thing here is to encourage medium-sized tenderers to have a go. We've asked the administration to try not to use the bid incentive and only propose it when there are no tenderers. And the government said that no, people might choose not to submit a bid this time, and then the exercise might be abortive. And the exercise is mammoth, $31.9 billion. Local SMEs cannot participate. So even for this bid incentive, I think we will only benefit international consortia. I'm not alone in holding this view. Your friend, Mr. Tony Zhe, also holds a similar view. In fact, this is what he said. The government should split up the contract so that local professionals and contractors can have an opportunity to take part in this exercise. So I'm expressing the views of Mr. Tony Zhe here. And the government said that the good things in the tenders can also be adopted. Then, you're being contradictory. You should split the contract. So if a tender has got a very good design, but it is not strong enough to take up the construction and management part, then why don't we split up the whole contract? I'm afraid that there will be big bid rigging. The government might be encouraging bid rigging, and whether the tendering exercise will be abortive. I'd like the PS to explain further. Will it be the case that when there are only 2 tenders, you would abort the exercise, and you will only call the exercise competitive if there are more than 2 tenderers? Now, a tenderer may encourage a 3rd tenderer to come because of the bid incentive. The former may not mind subsidizing the 3rd tenderer because the government is at a disadvantaged position. You are worried that there will be no tenderers. By putting up a bid incentive, you are encouraging people to rig the bids. Secretary. First, I thank Mr. Ray Chen for saying that you are not entirely against the idea of a bid incentive. As regards bid rigging, I think Mr. Chen understands that whether there is the bid incentive or not, there is always the possibility of bid rigging. And bid rigging is illegal in Hong Kong. I think all tenderers will know. Speakers off mic. Speakers off mic. Can you press the request to speak button again? Mr. Wu Chi-wai. Thank you, Chairman. There will be a committee and also a body to monitor the operation of the sports park. The committee may have to balance the interests of commercial interests and public interest. If the BDO operator is not sure about how to balance the interests of 2 parties, then the committee may not be able to find a way. This is a bit like the contract between the Urban Council and Wembley. Urban Council set up Hong Kong Stadium Board to conclude an agreement with Wembley, and the whole thing ended up in a mess. So perhaps the tenderers should also include in their tenders proposals on how to constitute the committee. Now, then we may need at least 3 to 5 days of preparation for 30 days of activities. That would be more than 100 days of idle time. So what would there be a mechanism for the public to use the venue during its idle time? And for the price adjustment matter, in the past we had cases of cost overrun because of unforeseeable factors. So even though it is a lump sum contract, but due to insufficient ground investigation or whatever, there might be unforeseeable factors to allow the operator to ask for extra resources from the government to deal with unforeseeable factors. So, can you tell us whether you have already absorbed all the unforeseeable factors into the contract so that the successful bidder or the contractor cannot come back to ask for more money from the government to cater for unforeseeable factors? And lastly, I'm sorry, I have quite a lot of questions. We are worried that if the contractor cannot cope with the project and has to terminate the contract, then the government may have to take over. The establishment is quite complicated. I'd like to know what should be the proposed establishment for managing the sports park, and should there be any contingency, how can LCSD find enough people to man the establishment? All right. Mr. Wu referred to the situation of the Hong Kong Stadium, and I think that's exactly why we need a DBO contract. If right from the beginning the operator can work with the designer and the builder, then the Hong Kong Stadium situation would not arise here. And Mr. Wu made a very good point. Apart from commercial interest, you and I are also concerned about the public interest, and therefore we need a committee with representatives from the sports sector and also from this council to ensure that there can be sustained monitoring of the sports park. It should be preventive in nature, and it should also play a proactive part. And for that 30 days, now if other than that 30 days there are more events, we welcome that. This is exactly what we want to see. We want more events to happen because of the sports park. We don't want the venues to be idle. We want it to be vibrant and dynamic. And Mr. Wu, I think you are very interested in sports. Anyway, you do play sports. If I remember correctly, you like cycling. I think the atmosphere for international world events to be held in Hong Kong is excellent. We've just had an indoor cycling event, and the marathon is started with 1,000 to 17,000 participants. We just had the e-formula for the first time, and also fencing. And the fencing event is going to take place in Hong Kong. And if we can have the sports park, I'm sure that will be very conducive to building up a sports atmosphere in Hong Kong.
Claudia Mo, 5 minutes. I think the government is very dishonest, intellectually dishonest about this project. First, you keep saying that this matter is urgent, that so urgent that it has to jump the queue. Now, there is a pre-selection regarding the bid. Otherwise, if there is any delay, the cost will be higher and higher. Now, all works projects will cost more with time. This is just popular thinking, but is it true? We are not saying that you should put it on one side. We are just asking it should queue up as proper as properly acceptable. Now, you are in a rush. You want this to be passed before 1st of July. This is a political initiative. This is very dishonest. It's a very major project. I'm telling you it should be 3 months, and you say it's for 25 years. Now, is it really that urgent? And you keep also saying that this is a very large project, it's unique, and yet you do not want it to break it up into parts. You just want a big brand name, and you even want to supply some of the money for it. And you say that the design should be holistic. Now, in modern aesthetics, now, why is it that one person's idea should be the best approach? Why can't you assign to different parties to do the design and then to operate? But you refuse, and you stress one thing. Those unsuccessful bidders, they will be compensated. Well, you say it's worthwhile because we get the intellectual property, we get the designs and new ideas, is a good bargain. At first you said there should be unified design and operation. Suppose I win the bid, then I feel my design is superb. And you say then that part of it should follow the idea of one of the losers. And you tell the winning bidder that should learn from the other bidders. So it's again a mix of different components. So you are afraid there wouldn't be enough bidders. Now, you firstly won't break up the project into parts to make it simpler. And yet you say that the unsuccessful bids can have a part so that the ideas are incorporated in the winning bid. Now, $32 billion. Well, you're certainly to get it passed. You admit that it is a projection. Maybe 40 billion wouldn't be enough. We are worried about this being a white elephant project. The Hong Kong Coliseum seems more and more congested. You say that sports is a grand thing. Now, actually, you expect half of the days to be idle. Can it learn? Now, this is a very large project according to past experience. No single enterprise can provide a bid. Now, several international organizations and local groups can form a consortium. Now, you will see whether there are local companies involved. Now, the administration cannot answer my questions. I hope you provide a written document. Ray Chen talked about bid rigging. you say that Hong Kong has laws against bid rigging. Now, if you are talking about an international bidding effort, I hope the administration can provide documents against on legislation against bid rigging. Now, if the winning consortium has members from abroad, are there international legislation against bid rigging or legislation in other countries against bid rigging? And I'd like you to look at UK or British laws, such as Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, that is cross-boundary anti-corruption laws. Now, Australia, UK, US, they have anti-bribery, anti-corruption legislation, so that the companies, when they engage in bidding abroad, cannot engage in bid rigging or collusion. Now, when these problems arise in Hong Kong, these companies would suffer criminal liability in their home country. Can you show such provisions in British and UK and US legislation regarding bid rigging? Now, members talked about the bid incentive issue. Now, let me give some examples. We were consultants as lawyers in major projects. Now, the legal fees might be $10 million. We might expend 200 or 300 hours on pitching. The company has to bear the cost. Now, apart from site visits and detailed designs and modeling, you also have to come up with a legal document, and you have to design the business mode quite apart from the hardware side. Now, there will be $60 million of bid incentive for each. You say that it will cover only half their cost, and it will purchase the intellectual property right. The thinking is acceptable, but how do you get the $60 million? Can you have a breakdown in respect of that figure? How many experts from different fields would be involved in the pitching, in submitting the bid? Now, assuming that these professionals at different levels and in different fields, if you can give us the hourly charge, we can then see whether the $60 million is reasonable. We say the $60 million covers only half their cost. It may require 3,000 or 5,000 man-hours. Now, can you give a detailed breakdown? Also, I heard from fellow members that the project is huge, and you seem afraid that there wouldn't be bidders. Now, actually, there's a preliminary process. Now, what criteria have to be applied for one to bid? Leung Kwok Hong? Now, let's relax on Saturday. Now, there is Cui Yangdai, an emperor in China. He built the Grand Canal. Now, when foreigners come to do business, he said, Hong Kong, he said that China is a rich country. Now, when foreigners come, they can eat all they want. And the silk fabric is hung on trees to show how rich China is. And the visitors say, now actually some of the people are not fully clothed, and yet you wrap the silk around the tree branches. So this is what you are doing. Now, you have very few events to offer. Now, I went to that soccer match. The soccer pitch, the stadium was only half filled. Now, and it's a British Super League. So now the emperor said, my neck is so handsome, who will chop my head off? Now actually his head was chopped off. Now you know some people change and blame him, and he said, okay, I'm bad to the people, but you also profit under me. You have honor, you are honored, and you are paid well. Now today I face execution. So, and someone else blames him. He said to these critics, he said, you are scholars, you prosper under me. Now, Donald Chang or said C.Y. Leung, they wanted to build East Kowloon and $8.8 billion. Now, if you want to benefit Hong Kong people, why don't you build the other parks first? Now, it's too big. Hong Kong consortia cannot operate it. Now, it's globalized. The machinery can be shipped to Hong Kong after being used elsewhere. Hong Kong people don't benefit. It's a waste of money, and the bill hasn't been paid. The cruise terminal, Lau Kong Wah, were you responsible? And there has to be built a $12 billion light rail to go to it, and now this Sky Rail failed in Sydney and elsewhere. It's $8.8 billion. Is so huge that Hong Kong companies cannot profit from it. Hong Kong construction industry, they don't make much money. Now, I won't let you become another Choi Yang Dai, Wan Siu Kin. Two views. Now, I think jumping the queue is very bad. Now, you said there is urgency. You frequently say that people's livelihood should take precedence. We don't see why this item should have precedence over livelihood issues. Now, some friends and supporters of mine work in the government leisure and sports departments, and they are not happy about what the sports commissioner said. Now, it said that the government facilities are not well run. There are no commercially minded talents to run them. Now, Mr. Secretary, they are your subordinates. Tell us what you think. Now, financially, financial matters, it's said that this is like another Disneyland. The government provides the land, the money, and then the contractor makes guaranteed profit. Now, you call it DBO a through train mode of operation, and I agree that this model exists, at least theoretically. Now, the winning bidder actually makes very little commitment, and he has control over 57,000 square meters of facilities, and he has the right to operate it for 20 years. So it's like Disneyland. Now, maybe the government is offering them some improperly good deal. Now, in the document, you said that after completion in 2023, there would be a hotel to the west with over 300 rooms, and yet you say it would be developed separately. Now, I don't know what you mean. Now, would you build everything to achieve economy of scale, or what? Now, also on the commercial receipts on retail and catering, what are your expected revenues? Now, I'm worried that the winning consortia may not be that keen because it's a sports park. Mainly, it's a sports facility. I don't know which consortia or consortium would win the bid. Maybe it makes enough profits on the light rail, and it then focuses itself on trying to make profit on the retail and commercial facilities. Now, well, but just ensure us that this mode of operation will be sustainable. How do you ensure that the winning bidder will do what's right and be able to do it? Now, I think the questions raised are all related. Now, it's precisely because of this DBO mode of operation. Mr. Wan Siu-kin said that the retail catering facilities will be operated in a commercial mode. So that's the point. We don't want there to be a white elephant. That's why we adopt a DBO mode, so that we know there will be successful operation.
And we have to admit that when it comes to commercial operation, we are not that familiar with such operations. That's why we have to get people who are familiar with commercial operations. In particular, even for those who are able to run international competitions, then they will be interested in running this venue. But then, as I said, this is the first time ever that we have adopted this approach. But then we'll be monitoring this very closely, and we're prepared to do it with you together. Okay, I'm afraid the other questions cannot. We don't have enough time for the other questions. Next round, please. Mr. Jeremy Tam. Once again, I'd like to say that the Civic Party supports sports projects and sports infrastructure like this one. What is most unacceptable on this occasion is about the bid incentive. Yes, $180 million has been turned into $120 million, and you're going to offer this to the unsuccessful tenderers. Yet it's still a matter of principle. Once you set this precedent, I'm really concerned that other infrastructure projects would adopt the same approach. On this occasion, the question that I'd like to put to you is, when compared to the original PWSC papers, PWSC 2017-18-2, page 7, on how you came up with the $30 billion estimate when compared to the latest paper. Well, I noticed that something doesn't tally. I would like to see if I've got it wrong. Okay, on this occasion, under item L, you put in a contingency, and that would be some $2.2945 billion, and in the footnote, you said that it would include the provision of $120 million for bid incentive. But then I remember there was $180 million set aside for the bid incentive, and in the PWSC paper, once again, you had the same amount for contingency. In principle, you've already reduced it by $60 million, and yet in the breakdown, it's not reflected. So the $60 million less is not reflected. And when we look at the $31.8 billion, the price is exactly the same. So where has the $60 million gone? Thank you. Permanent Secretary, well, at the PWSC, when we submitted the figures, the overall figure is the same. For contingencies, we look at the entire project, and then we set aside a certain percentage for that, as we are talking about some $2.3 billion for the project. That's why we are able to take out or use some of the money for the bid incentive. That's why we did not come to this committee for the bid incentive bid. But then this contingency is calculated on the basis of a percentage of the total cost estimate. Well, Chairman, I might not have known it well. All right. Originally, you set aside $180 million for the bid incentive, and that's been put under contingencies. And now contingencies have not changed at all. But then you told me that well, for bid incentive, you reduced it by $60 million. So instead of $180 million, you only have $120 now. So why is it not reduced correspondingly? Yes, I understand that contingencies have been calculated on the basis of the total cost estimate, but then $60 million is a substantial figure. So if you're reducing the total amount for bid incentive by $60 million, how come it's not reflected here? We should have been asked to give $60 million less to you. Apparently, you're saying that, yes, we have saved $60 million still. For contingencies, we will still get that from you, because, in other words, you're actually asking for $60 million more for contingencies, because you're talking about some $2.2 billion, well, for $120 million and $180 million. You are actually telling us that after reducing the bid incentive, the actual contingency will go up by $60 million, so that if there is cost overrun, then you'll be asking us for $60 million less in terms of supplementary provision. Is that the case? Well, for the $31.9 billion, part of it would not go to the successful bidder, because according to the initial estimate, out of the $30 billion plus, only about $27 billion will go to the winning consortium. the rest will be kept by the government for consultants and also on resident staff and also price adjustment and so on and so forth. It will be kept by the government, and if there needs to be price adjustment, we'll be releasing the money. In other words, you're getting $60 million as buffer in the form of contingencies. I don't know if I've made myself entirely clear. So you're getting $60 million more for that. So you're actually getting $60 million for contingencies, right? You're keeping it yourself. We do not have a detailed breakdown because for individual project there might be contingency situations, and that's why we need to have contingency for each and every project. Sorry, speaker is not coming through. We understand that, well, at the HA panel, the figure $31.9 billion was raised. Okay, after the meeting, you will have to talk to Mr. Tam again, because I don't think this is the right forum for us to discuss it. Next 5 minutes, Dr. Pierre Chan. Yes, I support this. Well, the consortium will be responsible for design, build, and operate, but then most of the construction will be paid for by the government. So they are asking for $31.9 billion. So my first question is, well, how can have you done any estimate on the profit margin for the contractor? Well, right, if it's just a small percentage, it will be close to $3.2 billion. The next question is about soccer, because I have specifically put on this soccer uniform to express my support. You said that a 10,000-seater indoor stadium, and that would also be used for the holding of soccer matches. And I've written in to ask how many venues which are in line with the standards of the Soccer Association standards, and apparently there are over 70. Only 3 are indoor 5-a-side soccer pitch, so only 3 are up to international standards. So where are they? Checkmate, Mei, Chianghuan, and Manshan, and these are multi-purpose main stadiums. In other words, basically you can use that for badminton and basketball. So I'd like to know how many such soccer pitches will be built at the indoor venue that is up to international standards. So 2 questions first. Commissioner? Chairman, on the 5-a-side soccer pitches, well, for the indoor stadium, there is a main stadium and also a side stadium, and they can be used for multi-purposes. And if necessary, we can use it for 5-a-side soccer matches. And also for the estimated profit, well, we have already provided the information at the PWSC according to the consultant who did the study for us. Well, under general PWP projects, the contractor's profit margin is estimated to be 2 to 3%, and then with incentives that might be higher, up to 5%, according to the estimate. Next, well, thank you, Commissioner, for your supplementary information. Well, both the main stadium and the side stadium can be used for different purposes, and also for soccer matches. The reason why I've asked these questions, because just imagine in organizing mega sports events in Hong Kong, for example, the Rugby 7, and also for the major events that we have held, what they've been able to boost sports development in Hong Kong. Well, for a mega event, if we were to organize an 11-a-side soccer match, we would have difficulties. So how many such 5-a-side soccer pitches are available in Hong Kong? How many venues would be available for international matches? Or how many pitches would be made available for local football players? All right, we've been told that there are only 3 indoor venues that are up to international standards. So in building this new facility, have you done any estimates so that we can have facilities so that international matches can be organized, so that we can have 5-a-side soccer matches and then 11-a-side, and then we'll be able to boost the development of soccer in Hong Kong? So have you done such estimates? Well, Dr. Chan is concerned about 5-a-side soccer matches. Well, about 10 or 20 years ago, you must remember that we did organize a five-a-side soccer match at the Hong Kong Stadium. It's a world match. It's a world competition. In fact, we do have the venue available. Whether or not we're going to apply for it, we'll have to take it up with the Football Association. Dr. Chen? Well, I've also asked some footballers, and according to what they said for multi-purpose venues, if we were to use them for international matches, even if it's not a soccer match, well, if you look at the lines, all right, at SUBCOMMITTee, every time when you organize a football match, they will have to use tapes to stick around the area, and then they will have to mark the boundaries by these adhesive tapes. So in the main stadium and also at the side stadium, if they are used for multi-purposes, does that mean that in future, if we were to organize competitions, we will have to use adhesive tapes to mark the boundaries? Well, as to how we mark the boundaries for individual matches, we will leave it to the operator, because in overseas countries, they have different practices. We will leave it up to the successful bidder to come up with suggestions. For the five-a-side soccer matches, well, the LCSD is now considering that in Stanley, in the South District, they're going to have a venue for five-a-side soccer matches. So there'll be a venue there. Next, Edward Yu. Thank you, Chairman. Well, on the 16th of May, in the paper submitted by the Bureau, I think there are some facts that are not true. Because in the paper, you said that internationally, there are DBO practices or precedent cases. In fact, that's not true. They also refer to Manhattan in Canada. In fact, you can check it out. In fact, it's a design and build and short-term finance case, and the expected expenditure would be $95.4 million, and the government did not fund the entire cost. And also in York community, well, there is one of the consortia has decided to leave the consortium. So one of the entities has decided to leave, and as a result of that, there are also financial problems. So you will have to think about it. Adopting the DBO approach has risks. And also in the third example that you cited, in Alberta of Canada, there is a venue. Well, in the information paper, it shows that the city government only funded about a quarter of the total cost, and the total estimated cost $48.3 million, and the city government only funded part of it, and for the rest is funded by the consortium, and it did it through a lease funding model. And the fourth example is in Atlanta in the US, the SunTrust Park. According to the information online, in fact, the city government and the winning consortium, in terms of funding, they reached an agreement, and under the agreement, through raising loans or in the form of bonds, they would fund the project, and then the consortium would have to be responsible for repaying $181 million loan during its 30-year operation period. So for the four examples that you cited as examples of DBO approaches in overseas countries, they are not really true. So can you explain why? Mrs. Fong, well, the four examples were given to us by the operating consultant, and they searched the information online, and they got the information from different countries. As our consultant is not here, we'll provide the information later. But then very often, the information that you get online might not be entirely true. That's why our consultant would be writing to the overseas contractors by email to get the information. Okay. In the four examples that you cited just now, you said that these are examples that we can refer to. But then in one of the cases, actually, they are not able to finish the project. The company ISG, responsible for construction and operating the venue, has decided to leave the project. So what preventive measures or contingency plan is in place to cater for that eventuality? Because in York Community State, the York Community Stadium, Okay, you thought it was a good example, but then in the end, one of the contractors decided to leave the deal. Bureau Director, okay, Professor Yu is a professional from the trade. You'd understand that in different professions, the practices might be different, including design, build, and operate. So what I like to say to Professor Yu is that you will have to look at the actual situation in Hong Kong, and it's very important to look at the local situation. In Hong Kong's case, we need such a venue. We need to have this sports park. We have waited for more than 10 years for it now, and for this particular mode. And therefore, you do not have to be mindful that it's possible that you cannot complete it. I'll be answering the question. If in future, someone who has put in a bid, then definitely he will have to underwrite everything. So we have already made it clear. He will have to come up with an underwriting fund of some $900 million. And if he had to pay that, then he will be sustaining very heavy loss. And we will have a committee which will be responsible for long-term monitoring. And we will have lawmakers sitting on the committee to monitor the progress. And of course, we have to prepare for that eventuality. But then we also hope that the venue can be promoted and implemented positively. Well, for the 4 cases, can we ask the research division of this council to conduct its own research, because I cannot trust that consultant. Okay, let's wait for their formal response before we decide on what to do. But then I'd like to emphasize that I'm not just talking about Professor Yu, because if any member thinks that the situation is very serious, then I suggest that you should go to the department as soon as possible for discussion. I hope that they can answer the questions right away instead of going back and coming back again later. If these are serious flaws, and if the administration has not been telling us the truth, it's a very serious allegation. And if that is the case, then Hong Kong is doomed. And I therefore hope that you can be more careful in dealing with similar situations in the future. I'm not saying that you're not telling us the truth. That's why I was saying that for any member who managed to dig out such facts, they will have to speak out early. Dr. Helena Wong said that I support the promotion of sports, but then on this occasion you're jumping the queue, and as we have said, the entire project involves a very long duration. It's so long that it can be up to 25 years, and even after 25 years you can still extend it or renew it for another 10 years. So you're talking about a period of up to 35 years. So it can be up to 2035. Well, we haven't really dealt with 2047. That's the expiry of the 50-year period. And yet you haven't really responded to the queries raised by members. That is, well, in that long period of time, will you be able to conduct a review and shorten the contract period? For example, during the first 5 years, can you conduct a review, and then you can just have the contract extended 5 years each time? So have I missed out anything? Did you intend to revise that? So please answer that again. And also, some $31.9 billion will be involved. It's a very substantial figure. We are not talking about $319. And in the supplementary information paper, you talk about the financial projections. And just now, the commissioner said that, well, the profit might be 2 or 3 or even 5%. Well, before coming here, you should have done a very detailed consultancy study. So I'd like to know, in the consultancy report, are there any details? Can you disclose it to members?
Because there are many queries unanswered. You say that the net may be $276 million per year, but we'll talk about 25 years, and things are in a flux, and you do not have a cap on the profits that the consortium can make, and there is not a minimum for government's dividend. So we are worried that we are giving the capital for another party to do business, we might end up having the Disneyland scenario. That party may make money, but not us. So even when we consider WKCD items, we need a consultancy report from WKCD. We are talking about $31.9 billion, and it will last 25 years. How come we haven't have access to the report? Perhaps Dr. Wong didn't have time to note two things regarding the term. Well, for 25 years. For the first 5 years is the construction period. We will set up a committee, and it's not really every 5-year review. We're going to do it on an annual basis, and then at the 10th year there will be a midterm review, and we can decide whether the consortium or the contractor can continue to operate the park. And as for the sharing of profits, PWSC members were of the view that splitting the profits alone cannot ensure public interest. So we have an underwritten amount, and we would want the score for this part to be higher than the other factors. So this will be reflected to the tendering board. What about the consultancy report? Can it be given to us before the next meeting? Would that be done? Secretary? PS? The Development Bureau has already submitted a consultancy report to the secretariat of the panel, and for our own consultancy reports, they've been uploaded to the relevant panel, and financial forecasts also added to the FC. Dr. Junius Ho will not extend our meeting. Will end after Dr. Junius Ho. I'd like to follow up on the point asked by Dr. Edward Yu, which is a very valid point. Regarding the York Community Stadium, I'd like to know whether there is any cap to the BDO contract there. For this $31.9 billion, there is no cap to the cost. If this $31.8 billion with all the consistency, with all the contingencies, and also price adjustment provision have been used up, then now it appears that we are the principal or landlord, and therefore they are just here to work for us. Now for York Community Stadium, if there were not a cap, I believe the contractor would not have given up. Of course, I support the sports park here, but we're going to provide $31 billion, and even for the consultants is getting about 5% of the total project cost. So the consultants, if they prove to be incompetent, and they tell us that ultimately the project will suffer slippage and cost overrun, how can we accept it? Now, it will start in 2019 for completion in 2023. Now, I want the project to be delivered on time with no cost overrun. Now, this DBO, we do not have any cap for the cost, whereas there they have a cap. We are being too generous. We will allow the contractor and many consultants to get what they want, and they can continue to draw money from us, and this is unacceptable. Of course, on the 23rd of January 2017, our consultant did many reports, and then in February 2017 they started to prepare the tender documents. Now, as a lawyer, I frequently copied precedents from other cases, so let's take a look at the contract from York. They do not have a cap. We are being very generous, $31.8 billion. If I allow them to increase the project cost, this is unacceptable. We're told that once the tender is selected, there will be a gazetto. I just want to know whether there is any ceiling to the project cost. Secretary. First, there is a cap. There's a cap. So perhaps Dr. Ho's comments may not be very accurate. And for cost overrun, now if this FC can approve the paper, we will start the tendering procedure, and we're quite confident that there will be no cost overrun if the project starts immediately. And if there is any slippage, we have this term. A delay of 1 month will attract a fine of $100 million. That is quite harsh. So we share common concerns, and we hope to safeguard the best public interest using these terms. All right, Dr. Ho, no follow-up. So time is up. Thank you very much.